Watch Your Morning Live. It features panels from the 1992 Universal Declaration of Rights and the 1994 Interim Bill of Rights murals painted on the surfaces of the east and south walls surrounding the former Central Prison in Durban. That's the Phansi Museum's 22nd Art Craft Tradition Calendar, which was launched in KwaZulu-Natal earlier this month. To tell us more about the project, we're joined by Durban law professor McQuoid-Mason, who initiated the human rights mural at the former Central Prison in Durban in 1992. The mural features on the calendar. Professor, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Maybe start off this conversation by giving us a sense of the 22nd Art Craft Tradition Calendar and what the inspiration was behind the project initially.
Yes, okay. Thanks very much. The 2017 is the 25th anniversary of having that wall painted. The wall was painted, as you said, in 1992. What happened was, I don't know if those of you that live in Durban will remember that the prison there had a grey wall all the way around it. And when we eventually got a fairly liberal mayor, I decided I'd approach her to say, I always wanted to paint that wall with something. And Bruce Springsteen had just had his Human Rights Now concert. The street law program I'd introduced, after Nelson Mandela was released, we produced a book on human rights for all, and I decided I'd try and get the wall painted. I was chairperson of Lawyers for Human Rights then. We had Margaret Winter, who was a fairly liberal mayor, and I went and approached her, and she said, great, you can paint that wall as long as you can get permission from the city's estates department. So I phoned the city's estates department and said I'd like to paint the wall, and they said, well, we'll check with our tenants. Their tenants were the military police. So they came back a couple of hours later and said, sorry, Professor, the military police say that it is against their ethos to paint the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the wall. So I said, okay, give me the name of the commanding officer, I'm going to phone him. So I phoned the person, I'll call him Colonel V, and I say, Colonel, I'm hearing something I don't believe. I hear that the military police are against human rights. So, what do you mean, Professor? I said, well, we want to paint the human rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the wall around the prison. Oh, the wall, no, that is something different, Professor. I said, well, this is very embarrassing because on the 10th of December this year, I've got a film director friend in New York. His name is Richard Kaplan. He made a movie about Martin Luther King called From Montgomery to Memphis, and he's expecting us to paint this wall. And if we tell him that we don't have democracy in South Africa, people are not going to believe it when we say we can't even paint a wall with human rights. So maybe you should reconsider this. Well, Professor, let me get hold of headquarters in Pretoria. So 2 hours later, he phones back and says, Professor, I've got good news for you. You can paint the wall and we'll give you a military band as well. I said, no, we don't want a military band. We're having a human right. Anyway, that's the background to it. So I then commissioned someone called Terry Ann Stevenson, who had formed an organization called Community Arts Project.
Yeah.
And we got a team of 28 artists to paint the 30 panels, because that wall went down not only Walnut Road, but what was Pine Street as well. On both sides, we had enough panels for them to paint all 30 panels of that Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it was very interesting because we had formal artists, and we also had ordinary people from the community. And I don't know if we can zoom in on the calendar, but if you look at the third image on the left, the one about freedom of religion, there's a well-known Durban artist, Joseph Manana, was painting that, and he was doing Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, and there was a Sangoma standing next to him, and he said, what about us? You've left us out. So if you look at the picture of the wall, you'll see he painted in the Sangoma into the wall as well. And then we had a couple of women who had never been to Durban before, ordinary women who had lived out in the rural areas, Valley of Thousand Hills. They came in and they painted two of the pillars. And even some of the military police guys took off their uniforms and came and joined us. So it was a wonderful sort of community project. And that lasted until the city decided that it had to widen the street, which was then Pine Street, and widen it. And they were going to demolish the wall. I said, you guys can't demolish the wall. I'll get my students chained to stop you doing this. It's now a monument because I've handed this thing over to the city.
Yeah.
So what they did instead was they demolished the one side they had to do for the road, but then they shifted the tower across. So we now had a much shorter wall. Some of the old UDHR was left on that wall, but the other side was blank. And then we got our new constitution, which came into effect in February 1994. So again, as chair of Lawyers for Human Rights, I got together a community arts project. And again, we then decided to paint the inside wall, which was going to face the future International Convention Center with the Interim Bill of Rights. If you look at the images, when you look at that calendar, you'll see that the big images are the UDHR because they could paint it on all 30 panels. But the images for the Interim Bill of Rights, because we had a much shorter wall, you'll see that the images are composite. You've got sort of combinations of rights there as well.
Prof, very quickly.
So then I handed that over to the International Convention Center on the 10th of December, 1994. And then finally what happened in 1996 was we got our final constitution. And so then again we commissioned artists to paint that. By then, the old Universal Declaration of Human Rights mural was damaged, so we got the city to repair the wall. We then had the final Bill of Rights painted on the wall. That image is still there. Both of the images are still there. They're very worn now after 20 years. We're hoping to get them repainted or doing a variation of them. So what we've done then is this calendar to celebrate this. But what we want to do next year is have an art and essay competition at high schools in KwaZulu-Natal for them to look at our final Bill of Rights, for the students to choose what they think is their favorite right and either to illustrate it if they're art classes at their school or write an essay about it. We'll give them all free copies of the calendar. We're doing a resource book the schools can have as well. And then we will have an art competition on the 21st of March next year where we will display the results of what the students have done. So really it's an exercise to promote our Bill of Rights in South Africa.
Okay, Prof, thank you very much. You know what, we've actually run out of time.
Sam, you want to know?
I couldn't even ask you any questions, but very, very quickly, maybe a final touching point, just the artwork and the role that it's played in educating people in that area. And
Can you turn up the sound? I can't hear him.
Yeah, I think maybe that's part of the problem. Prof, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
No,
on that note, I think let's
Sam,
do this, Prof.
Turn up the volume.
Unfortunately, let's leave it there then. Prof. McQuoid-Mason sharing a really interesting story with us about the 22nd Art Craft Tradition calendar and some of the work that's happening there, coming, of course, live from our Durban studios. We have to take an epic. We're back after this.